In today's video, I simulated over 400 years into the future in CK3 to see what happens. And now, we're going to go and try and cause a little bit of chaos. So before we get any further, it is worth mentioning that I am using the Fallen Eagle mod here on Crusader Kings. This mod basically allows you to go further back in time and be able to recreate sort of history back then as you would want it. So I'll leave the download link, which you can get on Steam, down in the description below. So as we can see, 400 years in the future, in the year 805, the Western Roman Empire no longer exists. The Eastern Roman Empire does, but the Western Roman Empire has sort of been split into two main kingdoms. So the Italia Suburbicare, and still on a postcard, and the Septum Provincii as well. Obviously, the Eastern Roman Empire is still the dominant kingdom in this world, and I do think we are going to place a count in that specific kingdom just because it's the biggest. I feel like it'll be the best opportunity to create the most amount of mayhem and chaos as possible.
I'm in danger!
Okay, starting off this character, I decided to go with the stewardship skill tree just because the character that we've got, he's relatively good at stewardship. It makes sense to make the most of them skills. So we decided to go with that just to try and increase, once again, the amount of money that we are going to be earning. Because my first focus here was to try and improve all of the holdings within our counties and domain, just to try and once again increase that amount of income, because we have lots of money in the bank at the moment. But for this to sort of be able to be feasible in the future where we are able to take over this empire, we need as much money as possible, because as we all know, ladies and gentlemen, money makes the world go round. And let me tell you now, it is no different here in CK3. There wasn't many holdings that we were able to improve just because we're so far in the future. All of them were pretty much improved already, but there were the odd one or two that I was able to get. It's going to take a little bit of time to get them all sorted. So that was our first plan of action. So next up, the issue was our spouse. As you can see, our wife wasn't particularly great in terms of the amount of skills that she was given to us. So I decided to divorce her. I then did try to look, just because we're so far in the future, for some possible claimants that we could marry into and maybe get the odd press claim that we could do with our son, if we did have a son. Unfortunately, there wasn't many, so I did just decide to try and find a wife that would be able to boost up my skills a little bit more, specifically the likes of stewardship and diplomacy, because right now they are the most two important skills that we need to try and focus on, and maybe get the odd good trait that we'd be able to pass on to our kids as well. We did make a decision. We did go with Biella, I think her name is. We were able to marry her, and she did accept, thankfully, and we got lots of money for it as well, so good. From here, I did just continue trying to upgrade my holdings. Some of them had already been upgraded from previously, so we did get that little bit more of income. Afterwards, I did try to petition with my liege in the hope that I'd potentially get an extra county. Unfortunately, we were able to get a council appointment, which isn't a bad thing. It allows us once again to get that little bit more income into the coffers. Two pieces of good news in quick succession. Our wife is pregnant, and we also got an extra skill point in the stewardship focus, of which we then went with Taxman, once again focusing on that money. And we then did get a son, and as we can see, he did get the comely good trait. So the plan that we had is currently going very, very well. We then decided to borrow some money from the Holy Order. They will totally 100% get that money back at some point. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. I then decided to go on a pilgrimage just to try and increase that monthly piety, in the hope that in the future we can start declaring some holy wars to increase the amount of counties and hopefully duchies that we will own. Afterwards, we then did decide, well, I say decide, we then got an extra skill point in the stewardship tree, which was very, very nice, of which we then decided to put that in cutting construction costs throughout our domain, and that did contribute to our monthly income. As you can see from our monthly income, it's getting really, really good now, and dramatically increased since when we started just a few years ago. Now, I did decide to get a little bit ahead of myself. I thought it would be a good idea to start looking at doing an independence war on my liege. Don't know why. Don't ask any questions. Thankfully, I did make the right decision and not do that. But our first bit of intrigue for this character, we did start to look at murdering some people. Sweet, sweet murder, Crusader Kings. What goes better? Nothing. We then decided to imprison our former spouse. Yeah, she definitely regrets getting married to me. And thankfully, we've got a 100% success rate of this. I did imprison her, and she's behind bars, and she's never made a bigger mistake in her life. But speaking of other mistakes, our own sister tried to kill us. Our own bloody sister. And rightfully, I decided to imprison her. We can't possibly let something as disgusting as this go unpunished. She's behind bars, and speaking of mistakes, she's going to massively regret this. I can't believe it, ladies and gentlemen. Our own bloody sister. Now, remember before when I was talking about declaring holy wars, I did decide on a target just on the outskirts of the Eastern Roman Empire. So we did start fabricating a claim on this duchy. And guess what? Two good things. We've got ourselves a daughter, but we also got a full claim on the duchy that I am targeting. So absolutely fantastic news. And with our daughter barely a year old, I do decide to marry her off in the attempt to get an alliance. Now, there is many good options here, but I do decide to go with King Cedidus II of Aradidon. Is that how you say it? I'm not too sure. Thankfully, they do accept this alliance, which is absolutely splendid news. I then decided to also marry off our second son, and we did go with the Septon Provincii. Of course, that is one of the kingdoms that we were potentially going to go with at the start of this save. And once again, they do also accept this alliance. King Hilarious, great name, the third. We get ourselves two alliances in quick succession, and he accepts. Lovely stuff. This holy war is going to go simple, I'm sure. And our first declared war is a holy war. Now, the smart thing I thankfully did was to get a holy order on our side, which massively helped our troops. We were able to get up to 8,000 troops on our side. And this war just got a lot easier, up to 31,000 troops on our side here. All of our alliances did come and help in this war. On our first major conflict is outside Philadelphia. The bulk of the enemy's army does get defeated. It was a little bit closer than I thought it'd be. We actually lost quite a few troops, but we did knock out quite a lot of their army. Obviously, we're down to 7,000. They've just got over 5,000, so it's still pretty close at the moment. And in typical style, all of our alliances and armies decide to come after we've just defeated the bulk of their army. The game then went into a running simulator where the enemy was a coward and we were chasing them. Thankfully, we were able to catch them just outside the city of Amorion, and it's on a postcard. And our friends are nowhere to be seen during the battle or during this siege. And after a little bit more sieging, we were at a point where we could enforce our demands 100%. And we can appreciate our extra counties that we've now got as our vassals. I disband all of our army. Before we can do anything, yep, they decide to rebel. Our vassals decide to rebel, and immediately all of our allies are recalled after just leaving. They're back. Our army is back up and running. But this is going to be a lot more difficult because the people we're going up against are a lot more powerful than us. They have more army members, and of course, we don't have enough piety to get any holy orders either. So we are a little bit at the hands of our allies here. If they don't help us, we could be in serious trouble. Thankfully, all of our allies do come to assist in the war. However, if you get a quick glimpse of it, they've got over 10,000 troops at their command at the enemy. So we do decide to marry off some of our other kids in the attempt we can get some more alliances, because we definitely are going to need it. If we want to keep a hold of all of these counties that we've got, we're going to really need to rely on our allies, because we are nowhere near the strength of the people we're going up against. They've got just under 11,000 troops, I think they've got. So yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. 11,000, obviously it's going to take a little bit of time for our allies to get here, but once they get here, we should be okay. But it depends if we get destroyed before then. That is my worry. And like an absolute miracle, one of our vassals gifts us 168 gold to help in the war. I can only assume that's because of the holy war we're in. And all of our allies do eventually get here. The bulk of their allies, just under 20,000 here, I believe. And oh yeah, we're in a good place now. We do catch the bulk of their army. Once again, outside Philadelphia, much like the previous war, they get defeated. And if we can get this war over and done with pretty quickly, I don't want to get into debt again, because we were like 100 gold in debt before, and we do get to 100%. Enforced demands, and then rebellious scumbags are no longer. We solidify our domain. And like a power-hungry tyrant and conqueror, we decide to start looking for other places to rule. Two options, one in the west, one in the east. We do decide to go with the duchy in the east. It's an easier battle. They've just got over 1,000 troops compared to the 36,000 that we can potentially have to help us in this battle. So yeah, they're in trouble. We get all of our army up and running, and the first major battle is in their kingdom, and they get defeated. Of course they bloody do. They get bloody defeated. They do launch a quick counterattack though, and once again they get defeated. It's not a good start for our enemy here as we decide to siege their capital. Wow, this enemy really isn't letting up. They launch another counterattack outside their capital, and somehow mustering up some sort of morale and more army and troops, they launch another counterattack, this time in their capital. We then have our own issues where we do go into the first level of stress. We decide to get a trait to lower our stress back into normal levels. And thankfully, after their final counterattack here in the capital, we are able to enforce our demands, and that is another duchy within our realm, and we disband all of our army, ready to hopefully celebrate in all of our glory. And then we decide to lower all of our army because we are losing quite a significant amount of money. Hopefully this will put a little bit of a dent into it. After conquering the duchy in the east, we then decide to set our sights on the west side, and we declare war on them. They've got just over 1,000 troops. Once again, this should be a fairly easy conquer, right? This should be an easy place to conquer. Well, unfortunately, that wasn't to be, as we do decide to go into a battle. But ladies and gentlemen, for the first time in this save, we lose a battle. Oh my god. We lost our first battle with this character, getting defeated even with the superior numbers. That isn't of any help to us. However, we are able to muster up more troops. We go back in with a vengeance. They've got under 1,000. We've got over 2,000. It can't be two defeats on the trot. Surely not. Thankfully, we are able to get the victory. They are defeated, and it looks like a victory as well within our sight. We decide to siege one of their counties. And unlike our previous enemies, this enemy is unable to launch a counterattack before we enforce our demands, and our kingdom has grown. Are we finally going to have a period of peace where we are not continuously at war, even if it is of my own making? Thankfully, we do. But then I do decide to start looking at my liege, and I'm like, can I declare independence on you? I wonder, am I strong enough to take war to my liege and increase our standing within this brutal world? As you can see, we currently have a pretty nice, comfortable amount of income per month. However, I decide to start thinking about making my domain a little bit more centralized, and we start looking at the policies, because the more centralized your domain is, the more amount of troops and gold you can basically have, and it can get pretty ridiculous. At the time, I didn't know how ridiculous it would end up becoming, but we do start building towards getting a little bit more of a centralized domain, all of our counties being a little bit more centralized. And as you can see, within the first one of us decentralizing our domain, we have a ridiculous amount of troops, and our gold is flying up already to 11.8 and just under, now over 4,000 troops. And for the first time in this save, we unlock one of our first legacies. We decide to go down the law tree, and focusing on the centralization, we do finally get to the top of the centralization policy. It was very, very expensive, and this gets pretty ridiculous very, very quickly. And we've died. No. Oh god, we've died. And we do inherit all of our counties to our son. We are 42 years old, which we did have 52 amount of gold per month. Now we have 28. So, you know, that's took a little bit of a hit. Our son is a little bit old for my liking, but we don't really have a choice, do we? We don't really have a choice. I decided to sort my court out and a little bit of admin while I have a bit of peace and I can actually relax a little bit before everyone no doubtly gets very, very annoyed, aka my vassals. We also go down the stewardship tree once again, much like his father. And at this point, I didn't actually know what our grandchildren looked like or how they were looking in terms of their skills. But if we have a look at our son, very, very good. 20 diplomacy. He is looking very, very promising. I then decide to finally do it, ladies and gentlemen. Finally do it! Declare war on my lead. 47,000 versus 14,000, and it is done. We're going to try and become independent from our liege and become a direct vassal of the Emperor of the Eastern Roman Empire. And this war really didn't get off to a good start, as part of our army does get trapped and gets defeated very, very early on, which is not a good start at all. Morale has took a pretty bad hit there, and they have mustered up quite a lot of troops, and we are bringing in all of our allies as we always like to do. But once again, it's going to take quite a while for all of our allies to actually get in on the action. So for the most part, once again, much like some of the previous wars, we are at the mercy of all of our allies to come and help us. And oh my god, they have got a ridiculous amount of troops. They've got over, I think they've got about 34,000. That's a lot more than I thought it would be. Jesus wept. And in a moment of absolute desperation, this war is not going well at all. All of our allies are scattered, got their own problems, not really contributing to this war. I start looking for absolutely anyone to marry off. Absolutely anyone. No one was safe from my tyranny. I was enforcing divorces. I was marrying people off when they didn't want marrying off. It was this period of time for my family. It was not a good time. This is etched in memory of all my family members at the time where I broke hearts. So I then decided to start looking at an empire. Aegibutus, is that how you say it? I'm sure it is. I totally have not got that wrong. And yep, you guessed it. No alliance. We are well and truly in a lot of trouble here. We are getting absolutely butchered. It's going to take a long time for our allies to come and help. And even then, has our enemy army got too strong for us to even make a dent within their army? And unfortunately, we were not able to get any alliances, and I'm sorry to say we lost the war. That's right, we were imprisoned. We had to surrender. We were not able to get a miracle, quite frankly. There was nothing we could do. Thankfully, he didn't execute me. My liege didn't execute me. We were able to ransom ourselves for 100 gold. But mark my words, we will be back.